Okay, so tonight we are so lucky to be bringing you lots of different study tips for from teenagers to other teenagers. So our first thing I want to do is to have our president of our teen board, Jolie Levy. She's going to explain to you what our IDA teen board is and why we started it. Jolie?
Hi, I'm Jolie. Okay, so in 2022, the IDA Georgia Board recognized the need for the voices of teens to be heard. The power of hearing from a peer who is also struggling with a learning difference is invaluable.
Okay, so that's basically why we started this. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to have each of the teens present some tips for you, ideas on what they do to study. And Jolie is going to start us off, and then we're going to go in order of each teen's first name. So that means Allison, you'll be first, and Sion, you'll be last, because that's the order we've got by first name. So without further ado, Jolie, please tell us what you do to study for exams.
Okay, so hi again, I'm Jolie. So the first thing I think that you should do is to definitely plan in advance, and you should start studying a week before your exam, quiz, test, or whatever it is. Just always plan in advance, always go to the teacher in advance. The next thing I think would be is to make flashcards, because when I write stuff down a bunch of times, it like gets stuck in my mind, and it's best to have the information stuck in your mind before exam, quiz, test, And another thing is I would meet with your teacher. At my school, we have something called office hours where we have 30 minutes a day where you can go meet with your teacher about stuff. I know everyone doesn't have that, but you can always shoot your teacher an email. You can always go to them before school, after school. There's always ways to meet with your teacher about it. And the last tip I have is to study with your friends, because studying doesn't have to be boring. You can study with your friends. Me and my friend, we used to go and play basketball while we tested each other. And every time we got a question right on the flashcard, we would shoot the basketball. Just make it fun, because it never has to be boring. And that's all I have.
Great. Thank you so much, Jolie. And by the way, that is backed up by research. When you discuss your whatever's on the test, when you discuss it with somebody else, sometimes you learn that you know it better, or maybe the other person knows it better, and you kind of reinforce each other's learning. So that's a great tip. Okay, Allison is our next teen to talk about her study tips.
Okay, hi, I'm Allison, and some of my best study tips that I do is I try to study in a quiet and comfortable environment for me, and that's usually just my room, and that could be different for anyone, and it's just honestly a personal preference. And then I like to study every day, even if it's only for 20 minutes, a week in advance before a test, because it just helps me and not cram everything at the last day. And then I like to take breaks when I've been studying, and before I go to the next subject. If I'm studying math, I'll take a 5 to 10 minute break before I start studying for English or history. And that always helps me not get overwhelmed and just pace everything out.
Awesome. That's another one that's backed up by research, is when you study over time, you're seeing the information more than once. So fantastic. Okay, Bess is our next teen.
Hi, I'm Bess. And some study tips that I use are that, so one of the study tips that I use for language classes, I take Latin, this is one that my teacher told me. It's been really helpful. It's where you write each new word that you've learned and the definition 8 times to really get it in your memory. And then later on, if there are other words that you have to review, you can go through, and the ones you don't know, you can do that again. But then also just asking a teacher about what study tips they'd suggest for their class. So then you can learn some other study tips that you can use in other classes too. And then you can also just find the studying that works best with you.
Fantastic. I love that idea. Embrace it, whatever's working for you, because it can be slightly different for everybody. Bram, I don't think we have Bram on, so I'm going to skip Bram's for now and come back to that if he joins us a little bit later. Carrington is our next team.
Okay, hi, I'm Carrington, and one of my tricks is to highlight keywords that you need to know. So if you have a planner or if your teacher gives you a binder that has all your notes, you can highlight keywords instead of the full definition so you know the specific parts of the definition of the words. And then go see your teachers for help. I have tutorial every single day after school and during the school. And I like to go to my teachers to ask for extra help. And it really gets me clarification on things I don't really understand. Then memory devices such as Quizlets, note cards. I like to make gym kits. It's something fun that I can do while also learning and studying. So things like that. And also a study calendar. Before my exams, like probably 2 months, I like to make a calendar and space out what I need to study for. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, Dylan is next.
Hi, I'm Dylan. I said that, for example, I have a bunch of teachers that are always open to office hours, which says use all the resources you can. And there's also a teacher that is specifically for like dyslexic kids or kids with ADHD at our school. And she's a very big help for before test, or if you're struggling with English or something, she can help you with your writing. So that's a bigger help for like a resource. And then said make flashcards and review them multiple times. As most people said earlier on, that you might want to study like a week before, start studying a week before, which is something I do because I make the flashcards and then study them for at least 20 minutes a night before bed to get stuck in my brain. And then don't wait to study till the last night, or don't wait to procrastinate. Like if you have a major quiz or test or project that's due the next day, don't wait. You'll be staying up till who knows how late working on it.
And that never works very well because cramming, it's been shown in studies that doesn't work very well. You forget all the information anyway. All right, fantastic, Dylan. Thank you. Jack.
Hey y'all. A great tip is to make flashcards and things that will help you remember certain material on the test. Another tip is to pay a lot of attention in class with good note taking so you can go over the notes that you might have taken in class when you get home, and just make sure that you're ready to study and so you'll be well prepared and organized. Another great tip is to highlight key terms and definitions and things that you might need to study. So when you go back to study for it, you will for sure understand it.
Okay.
It makes it a lot easier.
Thank you, Jack.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if I'm echoing to you guys. I hear myself echo. Okay, Judson is our next team.
Something that's been really helpful to me is using to memorize vocab words and stuff like that is Quizlets, Kahoots, and Gimkits, because it makes it so you can pay attention for a lot longer. Then something I do to stay organized is to create a schedule of how much time I'm going to spend on each one of my major assignments and how much time I'm going to spend studying, so I'm prepared and don't wait till the last minute. And then something that helps me with notes is I try seeing if I can get a copy of them before class so I can pay more attention to what the teachers are actually saying and not just focusing on making sure I have everything written down so I can actually understand it. And then even though things like Quizlets and stuff can help you, I always make sure I don't just memorize the words and I understand all the material.
I'm really glad you said that because I just read a really interesting article about that. And they were really emphasizing that memorizing is not the way to do it. It's really questioning yourself. Do I really understand this? And that's why sometimes studying in a group is helpful, because you might realize you could understand it better. All right, Catherine was held up, so I'm going to skip her slide. But I think Kedrick is here.
I said I like to go outside to open places like coffee shops and stuff like that. Sometimes I go sit on my balcony and I like to listen to music and block out other distractions because if not, I get thrown off. And then chewing gum helps me focus, and Quizlet is like another thing, like flashcards for me that works.
I like it. I'm really glad that you brought up distractions because I know all of you have a cell phone and a computer, and there's constantly notifications popping up and distracting us. And that happens to all of us. But I can imagine if you're trying to really learn and study something, you've got to really shut all of those off. So that was a really good point, Kedrick. Okay, is Maddie on yet? I think she was having trouble getting on. Okay, I'm going to skip Maddie's. Too bad. Okay, Natalie.
Hi. So like a lot of the other members said earlier, like preparing ahead of time, talking to your teachers about your accommodations is a big thing. So you like remind them, like you originally asked them for your accommodations, and then later on you can remind them just to make sure like everything's set for you. That's a big thing when it coming to exams because that'll help you during your exam. And then color coding your notes so then your brain like remembers them, and rewriting them is a big thing as well, because when you're in the middle of a test you can start to like remember the colors, and then it helps you remember the information. Yeah, requesting study guides and other places to find study material will really help you, because like connecting the dots in your brain is a big thing, especially with like sciences and history. Making a connection is what actually teaches you and like prepares you to learn it. Like I think it was Carrington earlier mentioned creating review games. Yeah, you just want to have your brain have fun, so then you actually retain the information because of the fun things you remember. And then practice material will also help.
I really love that you brought up reminding your teacher about your accommodations. Remember, you're one student, but your teacher might have, 100 different students.
Yeah, it's
And-
a crazy amount of students that they have, and they can't always remember, and they're also humans, so they have their own lives. Like you have to take control of your own education to understand how to study better.
Oh, that is so true. I love the expression. You don't need to just be on the bus, you need to be driving the bus. And that's so true when it comes to your education. Okay, fantastic. My next teen is Peyton from Boston, Georgia. Peyton, you're on here, I think. No? Let me go to Peyton Birch real quick. Sorry, Peyton.
Hey, so I was kind of just saying similar stuff to what Peyton had on her slide and what Natalie had said. Just talking to your teachers beforehand about accommodations is really important, so you're on the same page as what that's going to mean during each specific test. And then it's even more important if you need small group accommodations, or if you need to schedule your like finals or tests like that separately and completely, because most of the time they won't take that into account if you need to schedule separately.
Okay, fantastic. I'm going to go back to Peyton, the other Peyton. Can you hear me, Peyton West? I see you on there, but I don't think you're hearing me. Okay. I'm not sure what happened with your connection. Okay, we'll skip that and come back to it. Rowan.
Helpful ways I study are like using like Quizlet and quizzes, which really help me remember the material that I have to learn. Like for Quizlet, like you can use the flashcards on there, and then for like quizzes, you can answer questions that you didn't really understand. And then you can ask your teacher for study guides in advance, because you have more time to study, and it's harder for me to study with like dyslexia and stuff. So yeah, ask in advance.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. And Sion.
All right, so the key things how to prepare is to look over notes and chapters from teachers that that teachers give you from on the units and the lessons. Try why to stay have a class group after school, or so you can plan ahead of time like a test or exam. And in the morning breakfast is like important because it's like you can have eggs, cereal, whatever you have, including some veggies and not no junk food or no sugar. Okay, and really, the key last point thing is to listen to like spa or song on the music in a quiet room because it would blinds up from all the distractions.
Oh, that's such a good idea. Thank you, Sion. I love the idea of having some calm music. As long as it doesn't have a melody that I could want to sing along to. Okay, I'm going to start us off with some questions. And these are questions that people had sent in beforehand. So our teenagers know which ones they're about to get. So Rowan, you had said you wanted to talk about this quickly. The question is, what are your favorite apps or programs to use for note-taking, organization, speech to text, or any assistive technology? So I'm tossing that to Rowan.
I mostly use like Google Docs. It's pretty helpful for me because firstly, like if you're writing a text, you can create an outline and then say it to the Google Docs, which I feel like use the speech to text in Google Docs, which I feel like is easier than just writing it all out on the Google Docs like first time. And you can also use Google Docs for note taking, but for note taking, you can probably just use just find a pen and paper around your house that you can use. But if there isn't anything around you, you can probably use Google Docs, which is really helpful for me. So
would you say that Google Docs speaking into it, does that is that better for people who maybe aren't as confident with their typing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that way too. That's a great idea. Sometimes if you don't have to think about the keys to hit, it kind of frees up your brain cells to think about what you want to say. So I like that. Great job. Somebody in the had sent in a question about an app called Speechify. We were not familiar with that when we were preparing for this, so I can't really comment to that particular app. Okay, so my next question is going out to Bess. And the question is, how do you study for cumulative exams? And if you're not somebody who has a cumulative exam, it just means it's not the last month of material. It's like the whole semester or possibly the whole year. So Bess, what do you do for that?
Oh, sorry, I'm trying to remember what I had said in the earlier. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I mean, I'm assuming anybody else, do you go back over, like you look through your whole year of notes? I mean, you probably have to start.
If you
going on.
can, getting your tests back, like from all the tests you've taken throughout the year and getting those back from a teacher, I feel like reviewing your tests, if you can, is a really great option.
That's a good idea because you have lots of tests before you get to the exam, and probably the teacher's going to ask a lot of the same things, right?
And probably asking for the study guide that goes along with that. Like if they're giving you a cumulative exam, then they have a study guide for it, which means they have the like center of information that you should know. So you should ask them for that.
That's fantastic. Okay, great. Allison, how far in advance do you recommend that a student start studying for a specific exam?
I would recommend studying about a week in advance, which seems like a long time, and it's but like in reality, like it's not, because I used to study the day before the test and it was a terrible decision. And then like I learned how to like properly do it. And now I study like a little bit each day, like a week before. And it's helped me so much with like not being stressed the day before. And then when I like review over it the day before, it's not like all new information that I haven't seen in a while. And it's like all fresh in my brain. And I can like ask my teacher questions while I'm reviewing throughout the week. And if I get confused on something, I can ask them.
Yeah, there's that fancy word called procrastination. And I think we all tend to procrastinate and wait to the last minute. But really all that does is make us stressed out, right? You can be a lot calmer if you start ahead of time. Okay, Natalie, here's a question for you. I wanted to know how to make studying for exams easier for my son who struggles with ADD and executive functioning.
So, I've grown up with a friend who has struggled from ADD. And so as I watched her study throughout the years, she began to learn the tools of like chewing gum, having fidget spinners, like just having fidget items that will help her like while testing. She would also do this thing where she would rewrite all of her notes and color code them, and she'd play games. Like she would do all of these actually really smart things to help her study. So then even while tapping her foot or like not being able to focus in on something, she was able to think about the other things that normally you wouldn't think of while studying to help her actually find the answer.
Fantastic.
So acronyms will also do that. And color coding and games and just a bunch of random things, if that makes sense.
Right. So when she says acronyms, she's referring to, when you have, for instance, when you were in 5th grade and they taught you PEMDAS, in math, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. It's when you take the first letter of something you're trying to memorize and you kind of make a word out of it. So that's a great tip. Okay, my next question is going to Sion, and it's again about music. This person says, is it okay to listen to music while studying and doing homework, or is it better to be in a quiet space? Did you want to talk again about that?
Well, yes, because really both of them. Because when I leave after school, I go lost. Somewhere like it's not that far, maybe like 20, 50-minute drive. When you go inside, your brain feels kind of relaxed with the spot and sound and music. It's just like brings the stress out of it, to de-stress.
Exactly. I love that. That's why they play it at the spa, because it calms us down. Okay, great point. My next question is going to Natalie again, and the question is about motivation. What motivates you to study and be prepared?
So for me, what motivates me is like my grades, and my future, because every kid, no matter if they want to accept it or not, is like looking forward to their future and trying to figure out what that's going to be. And a lot of people want that to be the best future that it can be. And so by doing that, it kind of like provides them with a little like kick or punch to the stomach, just to remind them like, hey, you have a goal that you're working towards. This is what motivates you to keep going. And for a lot of students, I would say with their studying tips, like it's self-motivation. It's not other people pushing them to study. It's them deciding that that's what they want to do and actually putting their mind to it.
Mhm. Yeah, I do think I would agree with that. Mostly motivation comes from within. So, but there are, of course, subjects that are harder for us all to study for because we possibly are less interested in them or they're harder for us. So, dig deep and find that motivation. All right, Rowan, you are my next person. Can you give hints? This person says for someone who's very dyslexic, as well as dysgraphia. Dysgraphia is when people have a difficult time writing. It could be spelling, it could be trying to think about what to write or how to organize your thoughts. Do you have any tips for people who are dysgraphic?
I have dysgraphia, so I mean, I've had some pretty bad handwriting for my life. I don't think it like plays much of a role when you're writing something. It's your writing, you can understand it yourself. Probably not to other people. So like if someone can't understand it, you can say it out loud to them, like to a teacher or someone if they can't understand it.
If they can't read your writing?
Yeah. And yeah.
Well, and you said for note taking, because this person asked about note taking also, that I think you were the one who said you like to get the notes ahead of time. Is that right?
I like to ask for the study guide ahead of time.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know sometimes if you, like when I go to a presentation, I like to get the presentation so I can just write notes on it instead of trying to write down everything that the person is saying. It just makes it a whole lot easier.
And if you can understand like your handwriting for note taking, then if you write it down, you should like remember it still because you can understand your writing.
Right. Right. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Rowan. Bess, here's a question for you. What should you do if a dyslexic kid doesn't want to write in class, clearly refuses to write? This sounds like it's coming from a teacher. You've used many strategies and they haven't worked. He's intelligent, but he doesn't want to write in class.
I think that like maybe having some other options, like maybe having the student talk and maybe have someone who can write it down, or if the teacher has enough time, which might not always be depending on the class size, just go through each question and have the student like say the answer instead of write it down, because sometimes that can just be a bit easier. Or if there are just other options on other types of assignments, if a teacher doesn't want to create like a whole other type of thing for the student to do, experiment with other types of assignments for the class in general, because if there is a undiagnosed dyslexic student in the class, which is very likely since isn't it 1 in 5 students?
It's hard to know, but 1 in 5, 1 in 10, something like that.
Yeah, and seeing as most classes are pretty big, there's likely at least maybe 1 dyslexic student in every class. So, finding other ways to have assignments can not only just help the one student, but maybe even another student who might be also having a hard time.
Yeah, good point. And then of course there's speech to text. Sometimes that makes it easier too. Okay, great point. Okay, I'm going to throw out this one kind of for everybody. when your student is told to, okay, when a teacher says, just read the materials and read your notes. I mean, how does anybody, Natalie, did you want to talk about that? How does that make you feel?
It kind of makes you like panicked a little bit because usually when you ask that question, you've already done that.
Right.
But like, so this year I have a biology teacher who whenever I ask her any question, she says, go back and read the notes. And it always makes me so furious on the inside.
Yeah.
But what she's trying to teach you is like, go back, read the material, and if you still don't understand it, go ahead and ask her more clarifying and in-depth questions to
Mhm.
show that you understood what you read. And maybe that answers your question, but if you continue to have a question that doesn't really, like I mentioned, connect the dot, if you don't have the answer to that, then go ahead and ask. But by reading it over, you're refreshing your brain and trying to like mend that dot. And if
Mhm.
you actually need that dot, then you can go ahead and ask.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think teachers appreciate when you make an effort on your own and then maybe you can ask a more specific question. Okay. Okay, now you guys have not heard these questions, but I think some of them are very interesting. These are the ones that have come in since the last time we met. And the first one is, and Carrington, if you're okay, I may ask you to answer this one because I think this happens at your school. You can opt out of some exams. In other words, you can exempt an exam. So this person is asking, what is the benefit of taking the exam versus opting out of it?
So for me, I get to exempt from a couple of my exams because I have an A. But when you get something below an A, like your B, you can't you have to take your exam. So for me, I'm taking science and math. So I feel like it's easier because you don't have to stress as much trying to study for all your exams and cram, or if you do plan ahead, you don't have to study so much. You can only study for 2 subjects or for however many exams you need to take, but it's easier to sort of study and it's less nerve-wracking because you only have to worry about a couple of exams.
Mm-hmm. And that gives you an incentive to keep your grades up during the semester too.
Yes.
Have you ever opted to take an exam that you already had an A in?
This is my first year because it only happens at high school. So I don't know about that question, but I think you can have an option to take your exams. I know I wouldn't do that because I don't like the feeling of having to take an exam. So yeah.
Well, thank you. Hey, if you guys want to contribute, if you hear a question you want to contribute to, go ahead and do the thing on Zoom where you raise your hand, and then I'll know to call you. Natalie, what were you going to say?
I was just going to ask, like, Carrington, at your school, are your final exams worth 20% of your grade? Because
It's worth.
Oh, go ahead.
You can go. I'm sorry. I cut you off.
I was going to ask, like, because a lot of schools, your final exams are worth 20% of your grade. So opting into them with an A could actually lower your grade if you completely bomb it or just don't do as well as you think you're going to do. So working towards that A is definitely good.
It's worth 25% at my school, but it's either you have to write, because I know for English and history, you would have to write a paper and like multiple choice questions. So I guess that could like lower your grade if you don't do as well, but it's not as hard as it would be for subjects you have lower than an A in.
Okay, Peyton Birch, were you going to say something? Maybe not. Thought I saw a hand. Okay, I'm going to throw out another question, you guys. And this is not one that you guys really talked about, but how do you know what to study? Like, I mean, I heard a lot of you talk about underlining keywords and stuff like that, but how do you know kind of what to focus on best? What do you think?
So in some of my classes, the teachers will either give out something that has the specifics of the types of things that will be on the test or quiz or exam, or in some of the information, they will, when they're teaching it to us, they'll be like, this part is really important. You want to make sure that you know it. So taking note of things like that, or just going and asking the teacher about what stuff they can let you know is specifically on the test or quiz that you can study, or if there's anything they have that can point you more in a specific direction if they can't tell you exactly what to study.
Gotcha. Jolie.
Especially what was shown in your notes, like because if you take notes during class, whatever you wrote down, that's what you know you should study because you wrote it down, the teacher went over it. So obviously you're going to need to know it.
Good point. Good point. Okay. This is a loaded question, and I'm sure a parent sent it in. So I want to hear from you teens what you think about it. What can parents do to help you study, if anything?
I could answer this one. They could, like, you could teach them. I know when I was working on my exams last semester, I taught my mom like the subjects I was doing so I could sort of help her understand, but also help me understand teaching it to someone so I can learn it in a different way. And also they could quiz you. Like if you have flashcards, they can flash you and they can flip the card and see if you got the answer right or wrong.
Carrington, it's very interesting you say you teach it to the parent, because there is a lot of research that shows that if you know it well enough that you can teach it to someone else, you're ready.
Yeah.
You know? Okay, great. Peyton Birch, what were you going to add to that?
So really something to make sure that I have bottling where they're there too, and I'm more because I have one who's also being next to me, not necessarily working together, but just there.
So Peyton, I hate to tell you this, but you're glitching, and I'm kind of, it's a little bit hard to hear what you're saying. It sounded like you were saying work next to me, but not close, but not too close, maybe. It's a little bit what you were saying, maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe type it into the chat, Peyton, and I can read it for you. Rowan, what were you going to say?
I don't really study with my parents anymore, but I used to have like this card game where we would like use the terms and like play like a card game with them.
Good idea. Yeah, anything you can turn into a game makes it more fun, right? Natalie, do you have something to add to that?
So my dad, like usually I would go ahead and ask him if he would review things or ask me the questions on the study guide and see if I can remember it and actually answer the question. But he would also like sit down with me and I'd teach him the information just like Carrington said, but he'd make funny jokes or like ridiculous ways to remember things.
Dad jokes, huh?
But like horrible dad jokes, like even worse than just dad jokes, where like they would stick in your brain and then you'd actually be able to continue to remember them.
Oh, that's hilarious. I like your dad already. Peyton, thank you for typing your comment into the chat. She says, body doubling, just having somebody else focus near me so I can stay on task. That's really interesting. If somebody is next to you and they're kind of studying and being quiet and staying focused, sometimes it does help you stay on task too. That's a really good point. Okay, you guys lower your hands if you've already commented so that I'll know when to call on you again. All right, let me grab another one here. Oh, how about this one? When you're actually in the test, not so much studying for it, but when you're taking the test, what are some tips, you know, for actually taking the test? Anybody have any? Natalie, you got one? Go ahead.
If you get stuck on a question on the exam, you could highlight it or circle it and then continue to move forward on the test so you don't get stuck on that one question and waste all your time. So I would say like circle it or highlight it and then finish the test, and maybe one of the questions on the test will help you answer that one.
That's a really good point. And when you come back, sometimes you're looking at it with fresh eyes. And so it's not maybe as intimidating. Natalie, what were you going to say?
Kind of like what Carrington said, going back, because as you continue to go back, like it teaches you more of the information that's within the question that could relate to that question.
Mhm.
Another thing is, especially for dyslexics, if there's a teacher who says to the whole class, don't write on the test, ask to write on the test. You specifically need to go to them and always ask to write on the test, because if you're transferring it to Scantron, then the answer is not always going to register with you. And so continuing to go back and check and like writing things out and writing your acronyms out on the test and circling your answers and writing little comments, like those things are going to help you on tests. And sometimes if you really want to, and like you look at the first question, you're like, absolutely not, then go to the very last question and work your way backwards.
Oh, that's cute. I like that. And by the way, when you get to a question, make sure you read all 4 or 5 of the possible answers before you pick one. Because sometimes you read answer A and you think, oh, that's it, and you move on. But really, C was a better answer. And then there's a lot of research that shows that if you second guess yourself, you often pick the wrong answer. So kind of go with your gut. If your gut says C is right, just go with it and move on. There's research that shows people actually erase the right answer and bubble in the wrong one. Okay. Let's see, I might have, this was such a great question. It sounds like it's coming from a student who is not in high school yet. So you can really help this person, I think. Let me read it to you. When I get to high school, there will be a lot of information that could feel overwhelming. How would you suggest I find resources that help me process all this new information and keep myself organized? Any thoughts? Yeah, Bess?
This kind of goes back a bit to some of the stuff I was talking about with some study tips, but asking the teachers, because if it's a class that you're worried about, it's going to have a lot of information, then asking the teachers what they suggest, or asking them about things that they've heard students in previous years talking about, because teachers, they probably do listen to what the students are using to study, so they can probably suggest some really good tools to help you, and also just help with keeping all the information in one spot. They might know somewhere where you can find a whole bunch of the information from a unit, or they might have a Quizlet or Kahoot that'll have like all the information, or just they might know of some things.
Excellent. Teachers love when you go to them and ask for help. So I think you help yourself just by going and asking. There's one other thing I was going to say, I forgot. Okay, this is my last question that I have, and then I'll ask to see if anybody has sent in questions. And this is a really interesting one. Do you record the content to help you remember it? Do you ever tape yourself? Maybe tape yourself reading through it or something. Natalie, what do you think about that?
Me personally, I would say it depends on the subject. For history, never. Science, math, never. Lit occasionally ish. It's mainly languages when you're doing that. And I would find a big help would be to record yourself saying something in that language and then listen to it over and over, but translate it, like write it out in English, translating it, and then figure out translating that back on paper into whatever language it is. Because
so if I was trying to learn Spanish, I might say, cat, el gato. Like that?
Yes. I
I
was
think that
thinking
means
more
cat.
like sentences or paragraphs. Like if you're trying to do those kind of things, like one time my Spanish teacher made us memorize a whole script.
Yeah.
And so all of us would video and read all of our parts. And so as we did that, then we would all go back and translate. So then we knew exactly what we were saying, but then we would continue to remember it and process the information by rewriting it in Spanish.
Oh, wow. Hats off to you. That sounds really hard. Okay, I have gone through all the questions that I think that we've gotten from ahead of time. Aaron or Lindsay, did we have any others that came in as we were talking?
We had one question. I believe we've covered it. It asked, the questioner asked about accommodations to use instead of taking notes. And she mentioned dysgraphia and how that really makes it hard to take notes. Even rewriting the notes can be a feat in and of itself. So I think we talked a lot about that, about speech to text resources and getting access to pre-written notes from teachers or maybe even another student in the class. So that really is the only question that has come in.
Okay, fantastic. And just to reiterate, as an educator myself, I think every single teacher they want to set you up for success. And so really talking to them ahead of time and showing, that you want to do well in their class. And it wouldn't bother me at all if somebody asked me for the notes ahead of time. And I would certainly, want to accommodate that person as much as I could. So don't be shy. Okay. Well, I have seen a couple of comments about how fantastic you teenagers are. And I would agree with that. You are amazing. I really appreciate you giving your time tonight and so many other nights to prepare for this and to write all of your tips out, because I think you're going to help a lot of other teenagers. And that's fantastic. All right. So that was really all we had for tonight. I'm so glad that everybody could join us. And if you're listening to this recording, I think we are done.